All right, all right, all right. Good afternoon. My name is Maya Haridat. It is such a pleasure to be here with the CARE community, Coaches Against Racism and Exclusion. I am going to be the coach that is going to be sharing today, and I've got an amazing Power Pack session designed for all of you in regards to LinkedIn. Give me one moment. I want to share my screen for a second, and Cam and I were having a technical fight, but give me one second because we got it going now. And I'm super excited to be able to share with you a presentation that I know is going to make a difference for all of you in regards to thinking about LinkedIn, thinking about the next steps in your career, and thinking about how do you maximize LinkedIn? How do you get leverage out of LinkedIn so that you can shine as the professional that you are? So give me one second to share the screen. Okay. All right. So beautiful. So I see here that we have in our presentation right now a screen sharing with you about LinkedIn. And I wanted to take a different approach to LinkedIn than from what a lot of people often will take when it comes to this conversation about personal branding, LinkedIn, and how to be able to use it. Right now in the career development community, it's pretty common for everyone to give this top 10 list of here are all the 10 things you need to do on LinkedIn, right? And I think we've all seen this. Like, you know, look at your photo, look at your profile, look at your headshot, all of those types of things. And I thought it'd be interesting to really take a step back from that approach. Those tactics are important, and I am going to give you some very specific tips on how to maximize your LinkedIn profile. But I thought it would be more important to start out with this question. What do people say about you when you are not in the room? Because if you start from this place of what are people talking about when you are not in the room, and you think of that question as the key critical question for how to build your LinkedIn profile, for how to maximize your exposure on LinkedIn and any professional network that you're on, I think that this is going to be the place to really help you maximize what you can do as a career professional on LinkedIn or on any of the platforms that you may be using. So based upon that, if you have any questions about that, like when you hear that question, what do people say when you're not in the room? Talk to me. Those of you that are watching this live right now, what questions do you have about that? Does that question catch you off guard? Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever figured out what those conversations are? I'm going to share some content that will help you address that question from an online perspective, but I also want to dive into this perspective where we're thinking about this on a deeper level, not just what are the top 10 things for me to be able to do. I also want to highlight as well the importance as a CARE coach, which we are coaches against racism and exclusion. I also think that it's very important to highlight up front that this conversation is also designed to be able to talk about some of the conversations that often don't get talked about in career development, which is how do I navigate LinkedIn as a Black career professional? And there are some differences and there are some things that I think we need to bring up to the table. And so I'm also curious, have you run into any challenges with this idea? Have you ever asked yourself the question or wondered like, well, should I put my photo online or not? Or, you know, I know that there's bias, but like, how do I navigate this on LinkedIn? And what I will say is, while I'm not the expert on LinkedIn, I think it's important that we dive into this part of the conversation because, of course, these things are going to greatly affect your visibility, your profile, and your ability to move forward within your career. But let's get started with the actual presentation itself. So, oopsie. Whoops, and I'm so sorry. I think I ran into a problem with the screen. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. I'm going to do it this way. Give me 1 second. We're having just some technical difficulties real quick here. All right, Canva and I are not having a good time right now, and I apologize for that. Give me 1 second. I don't know why Canva now is not allowing me to share my screen. All right, so my apologies. I may have to share it this way just because I'm running into problems with Canva. So I apologize for not being able to do a full screen share, but you'll get to see the presentation. And thank you so much, Milka. I appreciate that aspect because Even though you practice the tech and you work on it, sometimes it does not always work the way that you want. Okay. Yes, I think that that's an important question from Artemis Leadership and from Milka. It's a big one. What assumptions that people may have about you? And that's a perfect place to start this presentation from. When we're thinking about LinkedIn and we're thinking about moving forward in our career, I think we all know you need to have more than just a resume to attract hiring directors, right? You need to have more than just saying, I have a LinkedIn profile up, I have a resume available, if you're going to get the attention for opportunities that you want, especially in this environment right now where, companies are really thinking very hard and critically about who they hire, who they keep on board, and what may happen. Vicky, interesting gremlins. Talk to me more about what the gremlins are that you're referencing. Is this gremlins of people that are looking at your LinkedIn profile? Are they talking to you in the comments? Talk a little bit more about what your definition of gremlins actually will look like. So I thought it'd be really helpful that if we dive into this conversation first, let's go over some basics. What is personal branding? Why is it important? Why do we need to think about this? And how does this matter for those of us that are Black career professionals and what we think about in terms of for our next steps? And then we'll come back to how do we now apply this to LinkedIn and being able to have success within LinkedIn. So here's a basic definition for those of you that have not taken any classes or done any work on this. Here's a very basic way of thinking about personal branding, okay? In careers nowadays, it's not enough. Oh, yes, most definitely technology, Vicky. Yes, I definitely get what you're saying in terms of the gremlins from technology. One of the things that a lot of us in school, when we were in college or, whatever your career path may have been, that we often don't get is this importance in the year 2020 and beyond to have personal branding be a top focus in your career. Right? So it's not just how you see yourself. It's not just the schools you've attended, the name brand companies you've had on your resume. All of those matter. But there's this thing where you want to also now look at, well, how do others see me? Right? How do they understand the value that I bring to the table? And what am I doing to craft that story? And that's something that, to be honest, takes a little bit of thought, right? It takes a little bit of work. And so for most of us, you're in your day-to-day work, you're in your day-to-day taking care of your family and all of the things that matter to you in your lives. And you're thinking, well, when am I going to have time for this thing of personal branding? And I'm just going to highlight that if you think about today's session as part of a bigger conversation where you look at ways to apply this idea across a lot of things that you're doing within your career, it'll become a lot less overwhelming. So it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing conversation. And I think it's something that I really hope that we all commit more to, that it's not just that you do a good job at work, but that you also commit to developing and sharing your personal brand. So if you happen to be watching this live, for example, drop in the comment, my personal brand matters, right? Go ahead into the comments and drop that down. My personal brand matters. Oh my goodness, Marsha, yes, 1,000%. There is a need to show passion, even online. And therefore, your personal brand matters. What you're sharing to the world, what that looks like, that completely matters. I also think that with a conversation about LinkedIn, it's important that we distinguish the difference between strategy and tactics, right? And this is, to me, a big one when it comes to personal branding, when it comes to thinking about your career, the goals you have for your career. Very often right now, that's right, Milka, my personal brand matters because it does. And this is something that I think if we commit more time and energy to, that you're going to reap a ton of rewards that come out of it because of putting your personal brand at the forefront and telling your story and showing your passion. So the first thing to think about this is thinking about your overall career strategy over just the actual tactics. And here's why I want to share this. I can give you 100 steps of what to do with your LinkedIn profile all day, every day. And it may not necessarily get you the job that you want, right? Let me just keep it real and put it up front first and foremost. So when you're hearing the ideas from someone like me or anyone else talking to you about, here's what you need to do for your personal brand, right? Here's what you need to do for your future career development. Here's what you need to do with your LinkedIn. I want us to really focus not just on the individual tactics, but this idea of what is the overall strategy? What is the plan that I have for my future and for what it is that I want? And so the first one is what you're doing now in the chat. My personal brand matters. I see Milka putting it in. I see Lysandra putting it in. I see Marsha putting it in. I see Miss J putting it in. Awesome. Your personal brand matters. And when you start with that as your strategy, you're going to see some results really show up. And let me give you a quick example. One of the things that I made a conscious choice a few years ago was that I put my personal profile photo up on LinkedIn. And I know that that's a hot topic sometimes when you're talking amongst professionals of color and specifically amongst Black professionals. Why? Because there's bias in the hiring process, right? And if you see my photo, you now have the ability to make a clear distinction about what race that I am and make decisions about that. However, here's where the tactics versus the strategy come into play. The overall long-term thing that I was looking at with my career at that point in time was that I wanted to get more speaking opportunities. I wanted to be able to be present more for panels, for actual individual workshops and trainings and events, which is my love. And so I was willing to take the risk. I mean, and I've heard it happen. And if any of you have heard bias in the hiring place happen, put it in the comments. I've seen bias. I've heard about bias in the hiring decisions, right? Like, go for it. I knew that that's a reality, right? I've literally been told, I mean, I had this happen about 2 years ago where I did not get the contract and was told by friends afterwards that, to be frank, they were surprised that a Black woman applied for this opportunity. Yes, in the 2000s, we're still having this conversation. But this is the deal. The long-term focus, my overall career strategy, which was making sure that my profile presents me as a speaker, as a panelist, as someone very public facing, was way more important than any tactics or tips that I learned. And so I'm willing to take the risk and put my profile photo up. Others may not have those same goals though. And so I can share a bunch of things with you about LinkedIn, as can others, but I do have to highlight that and spend a little bit of time on that up front, because not everything that you may get today may work for you. And that's okay, right? It's perfectly fine. Just think about it in the context of what is your long-term strategy that you're going after. Yes, Sharon, 1,000%. It's another reason why people are nervous, concerned, and rightfully so about doing video interviews. It's a reality. It's something that unfortunately is a big deal that exists because we have bias in the hiring process. So let me dive into the strategy that I think about when I'm thinking about both developing my LinkedIn profile, when I'm coaching people in their career about their profile, and things that you can now put into practice moving forward. And then I'll give you some actual tactics on here's how we do it. So the first one that I thought was really important is that I want them to know exactly what I look like. And I love you for that, Milko, because that is part of your brand, right? This is part of that empowerment. This is part of women's leadership. This is part of showing up and showing out. And so 1,000%, that fits perfectly into making sure that they know who you are and what you are bringing to the table. And Marsha, I love it as well, too. I love being visible as a confident Black woman. And I do hope that people watching the replay get this from both of you and understand the value that comes into that. And yes, there is always a risk in being able to do that, but your overall strategy and your overall career goals are pretty clear by just what you shared there in the comments about why you would share your profile photo. So here's something that I thought would be important to think about with LinkedIn is that one of the pieces of information that's coming out right now for different groups like entrepreneurs, and I actually learned about this through a sales seminar that I went through recently, is that probably to no surprise to anyone right now, in corporate America, in many companies, trust is really at an all-time low. And while this probably doesn't surprise anyone, and this came from the Global Edelman Trust Index. They do an index every year where they survey companies and they're looking at, what are people thinking about and what are they processing? What really came to the forefront is this importance of thought leadership. And I'm jumping now forward and moving ahead and kind of combining personal branding and thought leadership under one umbrella. But there's a reason for it, because I don't want you to just think about your LinkedIn profile as just, I do these 5 things and then I'm done. But more it's about its ongoing conversation and building a relationship with people over time that's going to get you seen. And so in a nutshell, I mean, and again, these are probably things that are not surprising to people. 64% of C-suite executives feel that if they know who the person is and they know that person's thought leadership, they're more inclined to hire someone, or they're more inclined to give them the RFP if you're an entrepreneur, right? And I think in many cases, it's the same thing. People have to know you. They have to know, like, and trust you. And so one of the things that you want to keep at the forefront at all times is when I'm building out my LinkedIn profile, what are the things that I'm doing to build that trust, to build that platform so that people are aware of who I am? These ideals like Marsha's sharing, I love being visible as a confident Black woman, right? As Sharon is saying, I want to be as visible as possible. If I advance, then great. They're going to accept me as my authentic self. You're already thinking about these types of ideas already. And I know without hesitation that these things will help those of you that may not know, well, how do I do that? Like, how do I actually make these things work on my platform? It will actually help you kind of moving forward. So here's a place to start. When you are, and whoops, let me get the screen a little clearer. When you are starting your own consultancy, right? And you're trying to get visibility to people so that they're aware of who you are and what matters. There are often 4 steps that you go on a journey so that you go from being this unaware, nobody knows you exist, nobody even knows your LinkedIn profile is available, right? Like we have no idea that it's visible, to this place where when an opportunity comes up, your name is the one they think about. And that's really what I want to help you think about today is how do you get your name indoors? How do you get your name to the top of the pile? How do you get to the top of the hiring director's desk so that they're aware of who you are? What are the steps and the process that you can use your LinkedIn profile to make sure you're standing out and people know you and they know that authentic conversation that's happening? Lysandra, 1,000%. If my image as a Black woman is negatively impacting the decision process, it brings to question value alignment, 1,000%. And this one is, I actually looked online to find some research on it. And I was kind of surprised that there really isn't a ton of research on the biases that exist within LinkedIn. Those of you that have been in hiring though, in those conversations, we know that those biases exist, right? I mean, we definitely know that those systemic problems exist in the different conversations that people are just not even aware of. It's part of those unconscious desires. I also think that part of it is that if we can begin to tell our stories, right? And if we can begin to create a way to make sure that authentic voice is brought to the forefront, that we're communicating and commenting about what that is, I also do think that this will also get you in front of the ideal people that you're looking for so that you find those companies that are in alignment with what your values are. And so this is a place to kind of think from and start from. So there's 4 steps to the process. The first one is when people are totally unaware of what you're doing, who you are, why they should care. The second step is where you're starting to bring awareness to who you are and why people would want to consider you. And that third step is an interesting one. It's when they begin to start considering you for opportunities. Your name starts buzzing up in different circles. And I'm going to give you a couple of tools of how to be able to get your name to start buzzing so that you move to number 3. And then number 4 is the no-brainer. That's the one where you're being called on, you're being referenced, you're being asked for different things. And even in environments like this where hiring or opportunities are not that great. I know I literally got called up this week over this very conversation. I didn't even know the person, but a large part of it had to do with my LinkedIn profile and the fact that there are ways you can get your name to the top of mind. So I'll start out with LinkedIn and break down how to apply this process on LinkedIn. And then definitely as we're going through, tell me what questions you have, but also tell me what are you nailing in part of this LinkedIn buyer's journey that you're working on. So the first one is making sure that your profile is up to par. And I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper on the next slide. But the first step is making sure that there are 3 key things on your profile that are taken care of. That you either have a professional photo or you're conscious about why you don't have it, right? And either or I think is perfectly fine. The second one is that you have been thoughtful about your headline. So one of the things that people often do when they're scrolling through LinkedIn is that they'll see your photo, your headshot or your picture, and they'll see the headline that of what it is that you're saying that you're doing. And for a lot of people, they use the default of whatever their job title is to describe what they're doing. And I'm going to challenge you. If you're going to be in this conversation about personal branding and definitely moving forward from thought leadership, we have to think a little bit deeper. And I want you to think very thoughtfully about what would be examples of good headlines to include that really capture the attention and the awareness of people that could potentially want to hire you or potentially want to refer client opportunities to you. And the third one is the summary section. And the summary section, for a lot of people, I'm going to show a sample summary actually to walk through. The summary section gives you the opportunity to tell your story. It should not be a place where you just put your bio there or just cut and paste parts of your resume or use the same language you have like in your executive summary. It's you really want to think about, what are the things that matter to me? And what are the things that matter to the decision makers that I want to attract? And you put those things in that summary section. So that's when you start creating awareness about who you are in terms of with your actual platform. The second step is actually building it. And here's where the work comes in at, right? You got to show up on LinkedIn. And I'll summarize it very quickly by saying that. If you do a set it and forget it on LinkedIn, right? If you create your profile one time and then you never look at it again, you're missing out on a major opportunity that LinkedIn has, all right? So if you're watching live right now, I want you to put in the comments, no, set it and forget it, okay? I think we've all seen that infomercial before, which it's beautiful if you're cooking and you don't feel like dealing with bothering with the food and you want the food to take care of itself. But when it comes to your career and it comes to your presence on LinkedIn, you cannot just set it and forget it and put your profile up one time. So what does that look like? What does it look like of creating awareness, of building your platform, of getting people to actually pay attention? A lot of times we may just show up sometimes and just like things. We'll go through the feed, the discussion feed, the post feed, and just hit the like button a bunch of times. I want you to take a step forward and I want you to be intentional and start commenting and start engaging in conversations. And I do want to highlight, not getting into the troll conversations, which I don't think anyone here on this live, exactly, Siani, no, set it and forget it. I love it. I love it. Actually, Marcia, I'll take your question because I think that that's a powerful one. Marcia Small shares that I've heard that it's important to smile in your LinkedIn photo. What difference does smiling make if it's a professional photo? Here's where I would challenge that advice. I think the reason the advice is given, and again, I'm just, one person in probably many reasons as to why we're sharing it. I think one of the reasons that the advice is to smile with LinkedIn with your photo is that it makes you more approachable. At the same time, when you go back to that earlier conversation I was talking about, well, what is your personal brand, right? What is your overall career strategy? What do you want to be known for? What's your personality like? You may not have the brand, to be frank. That's a smiling type of brand. And I think that's perfectly fine. And, depending upon the type of work that you do, I mean, there's definitely career professions, of course, one's not coming to mind right now, that if I saw you smiling, I don't know if I would take you seriously, right? So I think that one is a powerful one to bring up, but that's where it goes right back into that idea again. What is that overall strategy, right? What are your goals around how you want your personal brand to be seen, how you want your thought leadership to be seen? I see Sharon just broke through the noise right there and said, no code switching. Milka was like, I agree, we should not be whitewashing ever, 1,000%. And when you're clear about those are being your values and that's what you want to convey and that's what you want to be able to focus on, then you know that those are the types of things that, no, your photo doesn't have to be smiling and that's perfectly fine. It fits into really who you are and what you stand for. So thank you for being able to share that and highlight that, that concept that's in there. The third step that I want to dive into is where you start getting into the consideration stage. And this one is a little bit deeper, but I know a few of you actually here on this live stream, and I know that you do dive into this consideration stage pretty powerfully. And I'll share with you a few examples on the next slide, but here's what the consideration stage is. This is where you find ways to bring your influence and what you do really well to people that can make powerful decisions about your next steps. And let me give you a quick example about what this is. For many of us, we're involved in different professional associations or affinity groups that matter to either our industry or things that we care about for ourselves. That's right, Siani. Absolutely love this group. I mean, the idea of this, of no set it and forget it, is a powerful one, as are the themes that we're bringing up. These are real themes that we deal with as Black professionals, right? One of the things that I think is critical is that this idea for consideration, if you're involved in professional, smile if your neutral face looks like you are angry. So there's a whole conversation on that, Marcia. And, you know, it's interesting. I just led a women's leadership session for the past 2 weeks, and we actually had conversations about that in terms of, you know, if your neutral face looks angry. I'm not going to use the colloquial term, the smiling face that often gets mentioned in this particular case. I think that there are a number of people that are actually challenging that idea, though. And even if their neutral face does look like they are angry, because it's who they are, they're choosing whether they want to smile or not. And I think it's totally valid. I think it's something that can make you more approachable, right? And can make you seem easier to be able to connect with. But by the same token, ironically, if you're doing some of these other steps where you're building genuine relationships on LinkedIn, or this step that I want to dive into right now, where bring your professional associations and affinity groups online, build connections with people in LinkedIn groups. The CARES coaches, we have a LinkedIn group. Join this group, get to talk with other coaches, ask questions within the group where, you know, maybe you couldn't ask those questions in public, but these are things you need to have another Black coach give you advice on and give you some thoughts about, well, how do I navigate this thing? That's one of those ways you start building your consideration and your awareness, and people get to know who you are when you're actively commenting, showing up, and then volunteering for different things, right? So I think you can start to challenge some of these notions, right? Do I need to smile? And then what does that say for me as a Black woman? What does that say for me as a woman, right? It brings up a lot of questions. So I'll let you make the choice as to what you think will be the best one for you. But what I will say that can really help you with this idea is that if you're finding ways to ongoingly engage, show up once a week on LinkedIn, right? Join the different groups, join different professional associations that you were, you know, working with in person, join those online. Show up in like how we're doing right now, and we're having conversations and we're dialoguing with people. Like, I've just made some pretty amazing connections right now with several people via the comments, and I appreciate and thank you for the love. Do that and share with others the importance and the value of doing that, because you don't know who the decision makers are in those groups. And the more your name shows up, the more likely they are to put you to the top of the pile and make sure that you're going to get different opportunities. All right. And then the final one, which is the no-brainer, is your name comes to mind. You've got the decision. People are like, okay, I want you, I want Marcia, I want Milka, I want Siani, I want Sharon, right? Because we've seen you now. We know what your voice is about. We know what your values are, and they align so much with what ours are. And that's really the end win that you get with the buyer's journey, is that your name, when people are saying, hey, I'm interested in, you know, hiring this person for this opportunity, your name comes to mind immediately from several people's minds, right? Because they're aware of you, they know about you. And LinkedIn is one of those great ways right now, especially as we're still indoors, to be able to build those connections and those affinities to make that happen. So let me give you some quick examples. I gave 2 of them, but I do want to give some quick examples of how to do this within LinkedIn, so that you're making sure that those things are to the forefront. Okay. So the first one is that professional headshot. And I think we spoke about that a little bit in depth, but I'll leave it up to you as to how you want to navigate the professional headshot. The one thing that I will toss out is, don't miss out now when you're doing virtual events. I know that sometimes at different events now, they're having professional photographers show up, and you can get different backdrops behind you, right? So maybe if you're doing an alumni event, you get your college's background behind you. There's different ways you can play around with those professional headshots. So just consider that as one option to think about, of being able to put your brand out there and get more attention and more visibility. The one that I want to dive into now is that summary section and the tagline, because I think that there are some really important themes to highlight within that. So give me 1 second, because I want to stop the screen and I'm going to share with you a link that I thought was pretty important to highlight with this section and give you some examples. Because a lot of times it's kind of like, okay, Maya, I know my headline doesn't work, but like, what exactly should I do in order to be able to actually get it to work? All right, give me 1 second. Of course, now that I'm looking for the links. No, the page just, okay, here we go. All right, so I found some samples of both headlines and also summaries that I want to share with you right now that will give you some ideas, because right, we can always look at different ways of being able to boost our visibility and our profile. And I'll include this link in with the chat so that if any of you want to go to it afterwards, that you can go back and be able to use it. I'm going to teach you the hack that I use, because as an entrepreneur, I'm always trying to find ways to be able to hack this thing and find ways to make sure that I am not spending my hours draining my energy, but I'm doing this the right way. For those of you that really want to take your profile to the next level and you don't have the language for how to be able to do that, can I just be upfront? Hire a resume writer or hire a copywriter to help you come up with the headline or with the profile summary that totally rocks, right? Like, there are some examples here, but if you can't come up with some that you think stand out for you, then just get someone to work with you to figure this out. Don't spend hours on it yourself, okay? So the link is in the chat of ones to be able to check out. The headline for me is very, very critical, because your headline has to tell a story in just a few characters where people understand what you do. And I thought the ones in this LinkedIn summary were pretty exceptional. You know, Bruce here uses his title, so we know he works at Shippo, but this idea of sparking joy in recruiting and enabling candidates to be successful, like, how could you not love Bruce based upon him sharing that idea? He also, if you notice here in the summary section, he's not just reiterating all the types of projects and the activities that he worked on in his career overall, but he's finding ways to be able to share it to future employers that builds a story about why him, that differentiates why his story stands out versus others. And there's quite a few examples on here which I thought did this in a really, really powerful way. Let me share with you the next one that I thought did this in an awesome way. So Shanae, I thought was interesting because Shanae is an executive assistant, and I wanted to get a variety of different types of positions. I'm not crazy about her headline, y'all. Like, she just put in there her actual headline of her job, and I'm like, you had so much of what you could have been able to include in there. But what she did in her summary section, I thought was worth mentioning, right? She really talks and dives in deep about debunking what people think about a C-level executive assistant really does, and tells her story and builds her personal brand in a way where when I read that summary, I'm like, all right, I'll forgive you on the headline. Let's hire this woman, because it really tells a story that I think conveys the values, conveys the brands, conveys important qualities that we really want to know about. Why would I hire you as an executive assistant over others? So I do want to challenge you that if you have not looked at your profile in a while, double check your headline, double check your summary section, and find ways of being able to tell these stories so that people get, here's what makes you stand out, right? Daniel, again, I'm not crazy about his headline, but he starts out telling of how he got interested in software development as a kid, that he's been passionate about this for years, right? Like, that's a no-brainer way to stand out in front of other software developers, where they're not giving us that story about their background and about their values, and to be frank, their personal brand. So again, if writing is not your skill set, putting out this content is not your forte, I get it. Find a copywriter, get a good resume writer, and have them work to craft some headlines and some summaries that actually are really powerful. And then the second tip that I'll give you, which has been one from my recruiting days, which I think is pretty critical, is that in this summary section, one of the things that people that are not aware of on LinkedIn is that we know that recruiters use LinkedIn, right? We know that decision makers use LinkedIn, but what people often don't realize is that in the summary section, your summary is actually SEO'd. It's search engine optimized. When people are looking for keywords and buzzwords within your industry, they're looking for it in the summary section, okay? So do me a favor and type it in the chat right now. Type in SEO, all right? And the reason I want you to type in SEO in the chat is I want you, when you get off this call, double check in your summary section. Do you have the industry buzzwords that hiring directors, that people that are future clients are looking for, so that if they just do a general search on LinkedIn, your name pops up? And it's a powerful place of real estate that a lot of people are not aware of. But I know from talking with recruiters that will get the back end, they literally enter in the search terms and boom, they get their applicants showing up right away because of people optimizing this part of their profile. So that's just a little hidden tip to be able to make sure that you really stand out and you stand apart and people get the value that you bring. All right, so let me unshare this 1 second and then I'll go back to, give me 1 second. I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint real quick. All right. SEO, that's right. That's right. So SEO, it's powerful. And I don't know how many of you on here are entrepreneurs. And actually, like if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a consultant or anything like that, toss that in the comments just so I know, am I talking to career professionals or am I talking to different consultants? Because I could give you a lot of tips for entrepreneurs, most definitely on this one. But let me know if you are, because we can dive in more if you have questions about specific terms that you're using right now or that you're not really sure, because I want to make sure that you actually stand out when it comes to this particular section. Okay, beautiful. So yes, awesome, SEO, love it. Okay, so now we have this awareness stage where 3 things: headshot, headline, and summary. I also want to highlight, I love this profile here. So I put this one up here because I thought it was beautiful that Kimberly included both her title and then also this idea of career matchmaker, unicorn hunter. Like, how can you not laugh when you see that headline and also get like, she's got a personality? I mean, that I absolutely love about this profile that I found, totally. Okay. What about using Strength Finder skills in your summary or your headline? That's a great question, Marcia. I would use Strength Finder skills. I think a number of companies are familiar with it and some are not, to be frank, or they're not using the language. I would probably include those in my summary section and including them in a way where you're not saying directly, these are my Strength Finder skills, but that you weave in the skills into the actual summary itself, right? Let me know if that makes sense. So I wouldn't just flat out say, these are the top. I've seen some people say like, these are my my profile I've gotten from Strength Finders or from MBTI or from different, assessments that are out there right now. I don't know if I would do it that directly, but I would weave it into a story so that someone who knows the language of Strength Finders gets it immediately. And if they're looking for that, they'll understand it. But I also would do it in a way where someone who's not familiar with it also doesn't get turned off by it. And, confusion breeds like people ignore you, to be frank. And if they don't understand something, a lot of times people won't ask questions. But if you weave it into a story, I think the person who can hear it will get it, as well as the person who doesn't understand it. So very good question on that one. Oh, we've got consultants in the house. All right, so I'm diving into more on the entrepreneurship tip end. All right, so here we go. This is my audience. Tell them my people. I love y'all. All right, so here's the deal. I give 2 other bonuses on here, and I'll swing it now from the entrepreneurship and consultant perspective. 2 other bonuses that I want to recommend for you is make sure that you have included your recommendations. So make sure that when you have done great work for clients or you've done great work for employers, that you get recommendations on your LinkedIn profile. And let me tell you one of the benefits that I have seen over my own career with doing this. A number of years ago, I started getting recommendations because I saw that more and more companies were starting to look at LinkedIn first to make a decision. And then they would kind of call you in afterwards after they had looked at your profile. And one of the areas that most people on their profiles do not get bothered to fill out, right, because it takes work, is the recommendation section. So let me offer this suggestion for you because I've literally gotten client work from my recommendations. Talk to people right now in your community that you know would give you a good recommendation. Go ahead and reach out to 10, 20, 30 people. Only a third of them are going to fill it out, right? But here's the power of recommendations. Recommendations becomes this third party, you are amazing at what you do type of an endorsement, so that when people are in the consideration process, for example, of thinking about hiring you as a speaker or as a coach or as a consultant for a project, now you can PDF your LinkedIn profile, and without trying, you've got people giving you rave reviews about your work and what set you apart. So I have had clients specifically tell me, Maya, one of the things that made you stand out in the initial vetting process was we were able to look at the recommendations that you had. And I think people look at LinkedIn recommendations differently than they do the ones on your own website, right? Because LinkedIn is that professional platform. And they looked at those recommendations and made decisions about moving forward in the process. So for all of my entrepreneurs in here, for all of my consultants, y'all take advantage of that valuable real estate because people read it and they pay attention to it. The other one that I want to highlight as well, and this is an often neglected category on the profile, is the media section. If you have, and since I'm talking to entrepreneurs right now, I'm diving in on this, any awards, any media attention, any events that you attended that have brand recognition, any parts of presentations that you think will share your story. Are you kidding me? I want to see that all across your LinkedIn profile under the summary section. Make sure to be able to include those assets in your actual profile. depending upon the access that the person has that's reviewing your profile, those things will show up in a very graphic, visual way up front. And you'll be able to highlight recent wins, and you'll be able to highlight recent things that you've done that 90% of the people, if you go on LinkedIn right now, they're not using it. And even people that are, in the media that are getting these recognitions, people don't use that media section. And I'm telling you, it gets looked at, it gets traction. Okay. So make sure that for those of you that are looking at ways to kind of stand apart, those types of opportunities are options for you to be able to make sure that you fill in those sections. All right. If anyone has any general questions on the profile itself, just toss them out. I mean, this is a good point now to say like, hey, I did this on my profile, I'm not sure. I'll be happy to address any of them that I can right now via the chat. All right. So let's dive in now a little bit deeper on the sharing your message. And I found some very specific tools and tips for those of you that may be going into LinkedIn and you're like, okay, Maya, after I post, what do I say? Like, what am I supposed to comment? What do I talk about? Like, why would anybody care? Here's what I can tell you was going to start to happen. The more that you start commenting on LinkedIn, it's not just liking a post or even just posting like an article that you find. Those are good. But the more that you start commenting on LinkedIn, LinkedIn has changed its algorithm right now. And what's going to start to happen is you're going to be sent to people to say, hey, follow this person on LinkedIn because what you're interested in is similar to what you as the commenter are interested in. So I will tell you that LinkedIn is one of those like secret weapons right now for those of you that are coaches, that are consultants, that are speakers, because you're going to start attracting a bunch of followers. You have no idea who they are. They're all professional, and it works very differently than other social media outlets. I had someone about a couple of weeks ago share with me, Maya, I saw your profile on LinkedIn and I saw that you have, I forget how many followers it was. I didn't even know at the time. And she was like, I see you have all of these followers that are tracking you. And that really, for us, stood out as someone that you are invested in your thought leadership, in the space that you're talking about and what you're sharing. I have got to, more than happy to share the copy of the deck. Most definitely, I can share that with you. I definitely want to point that piece out, that is a major marketing hack for my entrepreneurs. Do not neglect your LinkedIn. Show up once a week. I have LinkedIn as an app on my phone, right? And I show up once a week and I do some of the things that are listed here as ways of being able to share my message. So if any of those bullets right now stand out for you, where you tag an author and explain why you agree with an article, where you tag other people who you know may have helpful input into this conversation, where you ask a clarifying question about what someone posted, or include an alternative solution, talk to me and type in the bullet right now. What's one of the things you want to commit to next week for your LinkedIn, or this week actually, for your LinkedIn marketing time, so that you can start standing out and people start understanding your thought leadership, they understand your voice, they understand your brand 1,000% more powerfully than your profile ever will. Because they're going to build a relationship with you over time. That's why people start following you, is they build this relationship with you. I'll also give you another secret hack too. If you're showing up 2 to 3 times a week with LinkedIn, your profile is automatically, via the algorithm, it's going to start to show up at the top of your network's discussion feeds, okay? That's visibility, my friend. So if you invest the time in working into this, and again, don't spend hours on it. Go on once a week, twice a week when you've got like a little bit of free time, and just do a couple of these hacks with the comments, right? Don't just like it. Actually type responses, share it within your network, get other people within your network involved. This is going to help you build up a following and build up traction. And for my entrepreneurs right now, I'm telling you from a marketing perspective, I landed 2 speaking engagements recently from doing this very hack. Okay. Like, it's really being done a lot. And because people are not using it, they're not doing it. So I hope that this idea is of value to you in this regards. All right. So the last part that I do want to dive into is this final thing of this overall conversation about how to make sure that your profile is moving to that next level. And that is where you've got in step 3. Now, one of the things that I know for a lot of us entrepreneurs on here is that we're always finding ways to market, and we're finding ways to network and communicate with each other. And now in this virtual environment, right, it's gotten harder than ever to be able to do it, right? So here's one thing that I'm going to recommend for your step 3. And if you think back, and I apologize, this slide, for some reason, I didn't throw in the last slide that I wanted to here. If you look at that consideration, right? where how do you get people to have your name in different environments start to show up? I'm going to give you the tricks on how you do that, of where your name shows up in circles where you want to start getting more visibility and more attention. Is start going to the LinkedIn association groups, the LinkedIn professional groups, basically any of the LinkedIn groups where they're having conversations. You can also follow hashtags on LinkedIn. So I do follow a couple of hashtags like career coaches. I've followed diversity, although I've turned that off recently because it's a lot, right? In terms of what's going on. I followed recruiting. There's a number of hashtags you can also follow. And with following either the groups or the hashtags, you will get opportunities to now start volunteering to lead different events. Now, for some of you, like I know Marsha's brand, you're probably being asked all the time to lead events. And I know several of you on here probably already know this and are already getting this. But if you're also thinking about this from a virtual space right now, I have noticed that a lot of professional associations this year have made the decision that they're going to either do a virtual event or they're going to wait till next year to be able to actually host their event. This gives you an amazing time on LinkedIn right now to show up within these virtual spaces, these LinkedIn groups, these LinkedIn discussion feeds, these LinkedIn hashtags that you're following, and get your voice in there, okay? Get in front of the decision makers right now while they're scrambling, because one of the big ones is there's not a lot of people that are showing up to do things virtually, and they need new speakers right now. This is going to start getting you into circles that you may not have been exposed into before, that you're looking for options to get. So Sharon, yes, what about writing articles on LinkedIn? Is it worth it? 1,000% it's worth it. That one is definitely a strategy that I think takes a little bit more time and diligence, because once you start posting on LinkedIn, you want to make sure that you're posting at least twice a month and putting up new content that you probably can't find on another blog or another chat somewhere, but 1,000%. So I started posting, I've done several events recently where I've been talking about the skills that I've been learning about doing events online, like speaking and training online. It's different, right, than what we've done in person. And I've been very intentional about posting articles about that. I haven't gotten out as many as I want. And I'm telling you, I'm getting people that are reaching out to me in the in my inbox, talking to me about that. So yes, writing articles on LinkedIn, people are paying attention to it. LinkedIn prioritizes it when it comes to their algorithm. They make sure that those things show up first because they want content that's not being seen anyplace else to show up and to get visibility. And 1,000%, it's going to help you make connections that you have not made. I'll also give you a hack about those articles, and I hope this one helps everybody in here. When you post your articles on LinkedIn, if there are people that you've been trying to connect with, right? You've been trying to have a coffee chat with them. You've been trying to have a conversation with. It's a great opportunity to be able to take the content from that article, either send them a direct message, or you can actually start following them if you want to and be able to highlight, hey, I thought this article might be of interest to you. You know, here's something I have on this particular topic that you might find valuable. Totally, if they want to read it, great. If they don't want to read it, that's fine. But I've actually used articles in a few cases to get my brand in front of companies that may not have otherwise seen me. And there's ways you can go about doing that. So I wouldn't just post articles and hope and pray people see it. I would actually post articles and be very thoughtful and intentional to make sure that people see it and that your name is being thought of in terms of those particular conversations, right? And so those, I think, are really, and then the final one, which I know a number of you on here do, but like, let's have fun with this, referrals, my friends, right? Like everyone right now is online virtually. If you have not already started making sure that you connect dots between different people that might be able to help other people out, this is an amazing opportunity and an amazing time to be able to do that. People remember people that are connecting other good people, right? You will always come top of mind, and you will always be the person that they think about if you're finding ways to connect people within your network. So if you have someone within your network that you know might be interested in going into a new field or a new industry, and you're very clear, like, look, I don't want you approaching my friend for a job, but would you be interested in having a virtual coffee chat and being able to just talk about the industry and talk about what's going on? Those things get attention, right? It's definitely a way to be able to get visibility. It's also just a good one if you know connections within your network that they just need to know each other. There's potential speakers that you could recommend for my entrepreneurs. There's potential consultants. If you see people posting opportunities on LinkedIn, get scrappy and start thinking about within your network, who can you refer to whom? Because those are things that also really help you in that buyer's journey to stand out and make sure that you get visibility. Milka, great question. If you post a blog post from your website, is it treated differently by LinkedIn or is it treated the same as a direct LinkedIn article? So what happens is initially it will be treated as new content. But the challenge is that once Google starts getting its spiders in it, meaning Google starts seeing this article show up, it will eventually show up that you had this article already posted on your blog. So it doesn't get the same love it would as if you get organic content. So Milka E, I'll tell you the hack for that one, right? What I do is this. When I'm working now on articles for my blog, there's a strategy that I've been using I find to be pretty effective. I start out first by doing an audio recording of what it is that I want to talk about. I get that audio transcription back and I get it transcribed so that I have the content and I don't have to take time to write it out. And then I either directly write 2 or 3 similar but different posts about it, or you can also pay writers to do it, right? You don't have to sit there yourself and struggle, how do I rewrite this? So in a nutshell, you can post similar content to what you post on your blog as well as LinkedIn, but I would make sure it's not exactly. Because yes, the algorithms do see that when you're posting the same content again and again and again, they don't like that and they'll start to bury it on one of the platforms. So my recommendation is just change a couple of lines, throw in, for example, on LinkedIn, I'll put one story on LinkedIn and then on my blog, because it's my blog and I want the love, I might put a different story that's a little bit more personal on my blog to draw more attention and more visibility, right? So there's ways you can kind of hack it and work around it, but I wouldn't post the same thing in both spaces. Find a way to build out your content platform so that you're giving different versions of the same content, but not the same thing. Okay. What are my thoughts about general fear about a lot of corporate people being too visible on LinkedIn? Milka, an amazing question. I know with a lot of the career coaching conversations that I've had before, that's a big one that comes up, right? Because you have companies that flat out tell you, either A, you can't post things on LinkedIn, right? Or there's certain ways of how you have to post it. Or they also, we know the HR is watching your LinkedIn profile. And the minute you start making changes, they're like, oh, is she trying to look for a job, right? It's real. It's totally, totally real. Here's what my recommendation is. I think that you can work the visibility angle by not adjusting as many things on your personal profile. I think that that's really where people start paying attention and seeing a lot of visibility. But I think you can gain traction and visibility by joining conversations and definitely joining LinkedIn groups where HR may or may not have access to those types of conversations. And mind you, I would be very particular about the type of comments that I'm making. Make sure it stays in line with what your company culture is and what you know that they would prefer. But I do think on the discussion feeds right now, you've got some room. You've got some maneuvering room right now to really be able to start posting ideas, thoughts, your insights as to what people are sharing in the discussion feed. And then also within the private groups, there's a lot of room there to build traction, build relationships. So I totally get people's concern about showing up too much on LinkedIn. But I think, at least for right now, this may change a month from now, I don't know. I think if you avoid making a ton of changes on your personal profile and you use some of the more public aspects of LinkedIn, I think that that's one way that you can really bring your visibility game and you can increase your personal brand without, ruffling the feathers of corporate in that regards, right? But here's another thing too. I mean, and I don't know what this is all going to look like over time. I do think a lot of the conventions that we had about the infamous work from home and what, culture looks like in terms of being online and showing up, I think a lot of those conversations now are getting redefined. And I think a lot of things are shifting greatly in this space. So my hope is that people understand that LinkedIn is not this oh, she's trying to find a job tomorrow, which it very well may be, and that's fine. But it becomes more as part of a normal and natural way of doing business and presenting yourself, that people are not seeing it so negatively. So Milka, let me know if that helps or if there's another question that you've got towards that, or in terms of how to be able to do it. So Marsha, in terms of transcribing, oh my goodness gracious, there are like 5 options that I use. So one, for the transcriptions that I want done perfectly, I go to Fiverr. There's quite a few folks that are on Fiverr that will transcribe your content for 20 minutes for $5. And so as long as it's something short, I use an option like Fiverr to be able to do it. If I'm doing it online and I don't mind AI doing it, right, where there's not an individual person that's doing it, there's an app called Otter that I use, and you can use it both on your phone, Otter like the animal, Otter, or you can actually get it on, you can get it online through, through the actual like Otter, and I forget what the actual URL is to be able to do it. Here's another one for those of you that are entrepreneurs right now as a quick win on this one. Podcasting and audio is starting to go through a revolution right now in marketing, right? And I think for a lot of us, we're hearing like everyone's got a podcast and they've got content up and things of that nature. I would highly recommend for those of you that really want to increase your thought leadership in general online to seriously consider doing, even if you don't do a podcast, finding ways to get your voice and your audio out there. Because there's a lot of talk. I have a few friends that are in the journalism space, and they're saying that companies right now, like we already know Alexa can identify your voice and can start, in theory, having conversations with you. There's a lot of talk that in the near future that platforms are going to be using audio content and searching that the same way they do written content. So I don't know how that's going to show up on your LinkedIn profile. I'm just going to put that out there. But I will encourage all of you that if you've been thinking about podcasting, or if you've been thinking about getting your voice out there and finding ways of capturing both videos and audios, use it, right? Find ways to use it. I mean, heck, you can put a podcast up where you actually, every time that you post the podcast episode, you post it on LinkedIn and say, here's the episode, here's why it matters. Like, that's kind of a no-brainer. I do think that the search for audio is going to be one that's going to happen very soon. Google now, they didn't confirm it yet, but I know that in the past they couldn't search podcasts at all. And I'm hearing rumblings from a number of podcasting spaces that they are beginning to start to figure out the algorithm around it to search via podcasts, right? So I need all of you who have thought leadership, you have something to say, you've got that personal brand, like embrace these formats, embrace these opportunities, because there's no doubt those of us that have the content out there right now, 5 years from now, when they finally figure out what it's all going to look like and how it's going to work, you're going to be the front runner, right? Like you're going to be in the front to be able to have people paying attention to you because you've had this out for so long. Okay. So we're at the hour. I hope that this conversation was valuable and helpful and gave you some ideas and gave you some insights as to things to be able to look at with your profile and really overall think about what is that big picture I'm going after? What is that overall strategy that I'm going after? And how does this now fit with the things I need to do on LinkedIn? Where do I need to be standing out? What spaces do I need to be thinking about in a different way? I'm totally open if anyone has any questions right now to drop them in the chat. And just make sure that you feel really good about ways of being able to maximize your LinkedIn to get your personal brand out there. All right, I'll wait for a minute just to see if there's any in there. And again, I do apologize. I had Canva in presenter mode and Canva crashed on me, actually. So I had to go into my hack mode in order to be able to get it to work. So I do apologize for showing the presentation on the actual Canva screen itself, because it was a classic moment of like the tech just worked. I love that. That is so awesome to be able to hear, Milka, in terms of your about section, because yes, actually a really quick one there with the about section for the entrepreneurs. I would recommend that you look at entrepreneurs on LinkedIn, look at the people who are in marketing, and look at the format of how they've written their about section. There's usually a three theme strategy that they have. They start out first talking about the client that they work with and the ideal client they're going after. They then talk about results that they've gotten within their company and like why those results are different from other consultants and other clients. And then there's a specific call to action. I definitely want to highlight that for the entrepreneurs. In your summary section, I wouldn't say this to professionals, but in your summary section for the entrepreneurs, make sure you put a very specific call to action. call me at this number, email me here to schedule an appointment, find a way to get to jump on my calendar through this Calendly link or whatever your call to action is, because in that summary section, it really is an opportunity for you to sell your business, right? And to sell your brand and find new people that might be interested in what you have. So I love that you updated that section, and don't be shy about including call to actions in with that section. Yes, Milka, it is easy to set it and forget it. I will own it times 10,000, but I love it that you're saying like, here are new ways that I can get involved and ways that I can think about, engaging moving forward. A quick one with that is, when we do go back out into like the real world again, make sure you have your LinkedIn app on your cell phone, because LinkedIn now has a really simple way that you can make connections in person, that you literally just put the two phones together and they connect with each other, and you don't have to go searching and finding people. So that's just another quick app way of continuing to grow and build your network. That the app works like amazingly easy if both parties are using it at the same time. Yes, I have to give a huge and amazing major thank you to Milka for having the vision of getting all of us career coaches together to pick various topics that we would talk about, have conversations to really, really highlight and really find support for Black professionals right now, because clearly our voices matter and we need to find ways of being able to support, especially Black professionals during these moments. And definitely I just came off of, those of you that do trainings, you understand, I just came off of doing a 2-week, 80-hour program. And I am literally here because I'm brain dead right now. I'm not even trying to lie about it. But Milka's vision of seeing the value for this and really what we can do to really support our Black professionals and our Black community in general, like that's why we're here and that's why we're all doing this work. So I definitely hope that it was tremendous in that regards. Awesome, Lysandra. If questions come up for any of you about LinkedIn and you want to reach out to me afterwards, I'm in the CARES group via LinkedIn, and we'll also take a look at the YouTube replay as well. So if additional questions come up, like definitely feel free to toss them out here, because we will be open, either myself or another coach are open to be able to give you some guidance or some support on that. And yes, 1000% Milka M is a total rock star, and I totally have to give her nothing but major thumbs up for showing up. But at this moment, assuming that there's no other questions, I'm going to say thank you all so much for showing up, and thank you all for asking the questions and engaging. I had an absolute blast with this session and hope that this was valuable, and definitely let's keep this conversation moving forward. And I can't wait to see all of you starting to win, where people are really starting to call you up because they see your thought leadership. They see your personal brand on LinkedIn in a really, really powerful way. So thank you all so much, and have an amazing major afternoon. Milka, actually, before we log off, do you want me to invite you in, or just to close it out? I'm good if otherwise, but I just wanted to just touch base. Yes, the CARE community are rock stars. Love you, Milka E. All right, awesome. I'm going to get ready to close out. Thank you all so much. Have an amazing major afternoon. Take care.